One of Ireland's most prolific portrait artists was Hugh Douglas Hamilton. He was known as Pastel Hamilton due to the success of his small oval portraits, firstly in Dublin and later in London in the 18th century. During the 1780s in Italy, he created larger pastel portraits for wealthy Grand Tour patrons. The National Gallery of Ireland holds 18 pastel portraits by Hamilton. While examining these works a few years ago, I came across an interesting technique which I'd like to share with you today. But first, some background. Hamilton's works reflect contemporary European pastel tradition. He developed his technique in Dublin with a French tutor before moving to London in 1764. Hamilton was famous for two things. Firstly, his ability to capture a likeness. These portraits are fresh and engaging, with a characteristic use of graphic lines. Hamilton was also famous for his speed of execution. He captured a likeness in a few strokes in one sitting. He had a prolific business, and more than 200 of these small pastel portraits exist. This rapidity is visible in the finish of the ovals. The pastel is applied directly onto cream-laid paper. There's no ground. The clothing and the hair is loosely defined, and thick white chalk impasto is used to quickly define lace neckties. These works are small and average only 24 by 20 centimeters in size. The edges of the sheet is bluntly cut to the image. Pinholes at the top and bottom edges of 3 pastels suggest that Hamilton pinned the paper to a drawing board during composition and simply placed it in a frame without mounting it to a strainer. In the 1780s in Italy, Hamilton began to paint large rectangular portraits in pastel and also in oil. Close examination of 2 large pastels in the gallery revealed that the sitter's face is on a separate circular sheet or oblong sheet known as a cutout or insert. These sheets is adhered to the larger sheet. The paper supports are each lined to a textile and stretched to a wooden strainer. In both works, several sheets of antique laid paper are joined together. An overlap is visible in raking light where extra layers of pastel have been applied to attain a smooth surface. Each face may in fact be on a separate sheet. In this portrait, an insert is also present. The paper join is visible in raking light, and the overlapping layers is visible in transmitted light. There are over 20 other large rectangular pastel works now attributed to Hamilton. These are in public and private collections scattered across England, Ireland, France, and the US. But do they all have inserts? First-hand close examination of the pastel layer in both reflected and raking light is the most effective way of correctly identifying the inserts. However, this isn't always possible as the works are generally framed or displayed up high. However, I've managed to examine or have examined 6 works so far, and all of these have inserts. This is Hamilton's most famous pastel. It is a double portrait, and both faces are painted separately on inserts. While these 2 works, both in private collection, have inserts, and these are visible when they're viewed up close in raking light, generally on a ladder. While these later pastels dated 1790 also have inserts. The dimensions of all these works and the inserts vary, but all closely follow the shape of the face. Unlike the oval pastels, the overall impression of the large pastels is of a more considered execution. The pastel is thicker and in a more consistent layer and may have been applied with a brush. Hamilton continues to use graphite to outline details such as eyeshadows. But why did he do it? Making separate head studies must have ensured a short sitting and gave him time to compose the portraits afterwards using a model or a mannequin. Did Hamilton simply invent this technique to meet his own and, more importantly, his busy Grand Tourist patrons' schedules? Well, Hamilton didn't invent this technique. French pastelists Vivian and Delatour, the giants of pastel portraiture, used inserts and the joined sheets. Both artists worked in Paris several decades beforehand, and Hamilton, however, never visited Paris. In the 1780s, Hamilton lived in the traditional artists area of Rome. He was only 15 minutes walk away from the French Academy, which was at the time a melting pot of artistic output. From new etching techniques to drawing from newly discovered ancient ruins, A sense of experimentation may have spurred Hamilton to increase scale and also use inserts. Indeed, he could have learned the technique from the many other foreign artists in Rome. I've yet to find another pastel artist using this technique in Rome, but if you have seen it, then please do let me know. This will help us all contextualise Hamilton's work within a broad European narrative. That's my email, and thanks to all these people with this talk. Thanks for your attention.